The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floor of the Henderson family's spacious living room. May stood at the doorway, clutching a small wrapped gift in her hands, her heart beating a little too fast as she took in the scene before her. This was the first party she'd been invited to since moving to this new town 3 months ago, and she wasn't sure she belonged here. "Mom, are you sure this is the right address?" she whispered, glancing back at her mother, who was still standing on the porch checking her phone. "Yes, honey, 1542 Oak Ridge Lane, this is it." Her mom gave her an encouraging smile. "I'll pick you up at 7, okay? Have fun and try to make some friends." May nodded, though the knot in her stomach tightened. Making friends had never been easy for her, and this move had only made things harder. At 16, she felt like everyone already had their established groups, their inside jokes, their shared histories. She was just the new girl who sat quietly in the back of the classroom, too shy to raise her hand even when she knew the answers. "You must be May." Come in, come in." A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dazzling smile appeared at the door. Mrs. Henderson, Liam's mother. She ushered May inside with a wave to her mom, who gave one last encouraging thumbs up before heading back to the car. "Everyone's in the backyard. Liam will be so glad you could make it," Mrs. Henderson said, leading her through the house. May doubted that. Liam had only invited her because their science teacher had paired them up for a project last week. The invitation seemed more like politeness than genuine interest in her company. Still, she followed Mrs. Henderson, trying not to gape at the beautiful home with its high ceilings, artwork on the walls, and furniture that looked like it came straight from a magazine. As they passed through the living room, something caught May's eye, making her stop in her tracks. There, positioned near the large bay window, stood a magnificent grand piano. Its glossy black surface gleamed in the sunlight, and even from a distance May could tell it was well maintained and probably worth more than everything her family owned. "Do you play?" Mrs. Henderson asked, noticing her interest. "I used to," May said softly, the words catching in her throat. She hadn't touched a piano in almost 2 years, not since Grandma Lee passed away. "Well, feel free to play later if you'd like. It mostly sits there looking pretty these days. Now let's get you outside with the others." Before she could respond, May found herself guided through French doors and onto a stone patio where about 15 teenagers were gathered around a pool. Some were swimming, others lounging on chairs, music playing from outdoor speakers. She recognized most of them from school. The popular crowd that Liam ran with, kids who drove their own cars and wore designer clothes. "Liam, look who's here," Mrs. Henderson called out. Liam looked up from where he was sitting with his friends. "Oh, hey, you made it." He gave a quick wave but didn't get up. "There's drinks and snacks on the table. Make yourself at home," Mrs. Henderson said before disappearing back into the house. May stood awkwardly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She placed her gift on the table with the others and grabbed a can of soda, mostly to have something to do with her hands. No one seemed particularly interested in talking to her, though a couple of girls glanced her way and whispered something that made them laugh. She found an empty chair at the edge of the patio and sat down, opening her soda and taking a small sip. From here, if she turned slightly, she could see the piano through the French doors. Her fingers itched with sudden memory, the countless hours she'd spent on the old upright in Grandma Lee's apartment, learning to play everything from classical pieces to popular songs. Earth to New Girl. "Hello?" A voice broke through her thoughts. May blinked, realizing a girl with curly brown hair was standing in front of her. "Sorry, I was just..." May trailed off, completely zoning out. The girl finished for her, but she was smiling. "I'm Zoe. We have English together." "May," she replied, grateful that someone had approached her. "I know," Zoe said, sitting in the chair next to her. "You wrote that amazing essay about moving between cultures. Ms. Patterson read parts of it to the class, remember?" May felt her cheeks warm. "I didn't think anyone paid attention to that." "Are you kidding? It was the only thing that kept me awake that day." Zoe laughed. "So how are you liking Westridge so far?" Their conversation flowed easier than May expected. Zoe had moved to town herself the previous year and understood what it was like to be the new kid. As they talked, more people joined their circle. Tyler, a lanky boy with glasses who was on the debate team. Nadia, who ran track and had the most infectious laugh May had ever heard. And even Liam eventually wandered over, seeming more relaxed away from his core group of friends. When dark clouds started rolling in, threatening rain, Mrs. Henderson called everyone inside. The party moved to the finished basement with its huge TV, gaming systems, and pool table. May found herself actually enjoying the gathering, especially when they broke into teams for a trivia game that had everyone laughing and shouting answers. After the game, people scattered throughout the house. Some stayed in the basement to play video games. Others headed to the kitchen for more food. May found herself wandering back to the living room, drawn once again to the piano. The room was empty now, quiet compared to the noise from other parts of the house. She approached the instrument slowly, running her fingers lightly along its smooth edge. The lid was closed, but she could imagine the strings and hammers beneath waiting to bring music to life. How many times had Grandma Lee told her that a silent piano was like a bird with folded wings, full of potential flight and song? "You should open it." May jumped, startled by the voice behind her. An older boy stood in the doorway. She recognized him as Liam's brother, home from college for the weekend. "Oh, I was just looking," she said quickly, pulling her hand away. He shrugged. "No one ever plays it anymore. Dad bought it for Mom years ago, thinking she'd take lessons, but she never did. It's pretty much just decoration now." "That's a shame," May said, unable to keep the sadness from her voice. "A piano like this deserved to be played. You know how to play?" he asked, walking further into the room. "My grandmother taught me," she admitted, "but I haven't played in a long time." "Well, go ahead if you want. I'm Jin, by the way." "May." She hesitated, looking back at the piano. The temptation was overwhelming. Her fingers practically tingled with the desire to touch the keys, to see if she still remembered the feel of them, the pressure needed to produce just the right sound. Before she could decide, voices and footsteps approached. Liam appeared with several of his friends. "What are you guys doing in here?" Liam asked, looking between his brother and May. "Nothing. Just talking," Jin said with a shrug. One of Liam's friends, a tall boy whose name May couldn't remember, spotted her standing near the piano. "Are you going to play something for us?" he asked, his tone suggesting he found the idea amusing. I don't know," May stammered, suddenly self-conscious with all the attention on her. "Oh, you have to now," another boy chimed in. "You can't just stand there looking all mysterious by the piano and not play anything." More people had wandered into the room, attracted by the commotion. Zoe appeared and gave May an encouraging smile. "Do you play? That's so cool." "She says her grandmother taught her," Jin offered. May felt her cheeks burning as more eyes turned toward her. This wasn't how she wanted to be noticed. Playing the piano had always been something private, something sacred between her and Grandma Lee. "Well," the tall boy pressed a challenging edge to his voice, "let's hear something." "Leave her alone, Chad," Zoe said, rolling her eyes. But now everyone was looking at May expectantly. Some seemed genuinely curious, others clearly skeptical, as if they couldn't believe someone like her would have any talent worth witnessing. Her heart hammered in her chest. Part of her wanted to run from the room, to escape all these staring eyes. But another part, a stronger part that sounded suspiciously like Grandma Lee's voice in her head, urged her to sit down on that bench and show them all what music really meant. Taking a deep breath, May stepped closer to the piano. Jin moved forward and lifted the lid for her, revealing the pristine white and black keys beneath. The sight of them, so familiar yet foreign after all this time, made her breath catch. She glanced around the room one more time at all the faces watching her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Then, with a silent apology to her grandmother for staying away from music for so long, she carefully sat down on the bench, adjusted her posture the way she'd been taught, and placed her trembling hands over the keys. The moment of truth had arrived. Would her fingers remember what her heart had never forgotten? As May's fingers hovered over the keys, a hush fell over the room. She could feel the weight of everyone's stares, their expectations hanging heavy in the air. Chad leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed and eyebrows raised in challenge. A few kids had pulled out their phones, ready to capture what they assumed would be an awkward moment. "This should be good," someone whispered, followed by a few stifled laughs. May's fingers trembled slightly. It had been so long since she'd touched a piano, almost 2 years of silence since Grandma Lee had passed away. The piano they'd played on together had been sold to help with funeral costs. She had promised herself she wouldn't play again. The loss too raw, the memories too painful. But now, sitting before this magnificent instrument, something stirred within her. She placed her fingers on the cool keys, the familiar sensation sending a jolt through her body. It felt like greeting an old friend. "Hey, new girl, we're waiting," Chad called out, impatience clear in his voice. "Or did you just want to pose with the piano?" A few more snickers rippled through the growing crowd. Even Liam looked uncomfortable now, like he regretted this turn of events at his party. "Maybe she's just nervous," Zoe suggested, trying to be kind. "It's okay if you don't want to." But May wasn't listening anymore. She had closed her eyes, letting the world around her fade away. In her mind, she was back in Grandma Lee's small apartment, the late afternoon sun filtering through thin curtains, the smell of jasmine tea in the air. She could almost hear her grandmother's gentle voice. "Music is not in the piano, little one. Music is in you." May took a deep breath and began to play. Her fingers stumbled at first, finding their way after the long absence. She'd chosen a simple melody, one of the first pieces her grandmother had taught her. The notes came tentatively, hesitantly, like cautious footsteps on unfamiliar ground. Someone snorted. Another whispered something that made others laugh. "Told you," Chad muttered, already losing interest. "Another wannabe." The words stung, but instead of shrinking away, May felt something shift inside her. A spark of defiance ignited. She straightened her back the way Grandma Lee had always instructed, and let her fingers find their confidence. The simple melody gave way to something more complex. Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of her grandmother's favorites. As the beautiful dreamlike notes filled the room, the whispering stopped. The laughter died away. Even Chad's smirk faltered. May's fingers danced across the keys with growing assurance, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. The music flowed through her, a river-long dam now breaking free. She had forgotten this feeling, or perhaps she had forced herself to forget, this sensation of being both lost and found at the same time, of being a vessel for something greater than herself. She could feel tears threatening behind her closed eyelids, but didn't stop playing. This was for Grandma Lee, who had believed in her talent even when no one else did, who had saved for years to buy that old upright piano, who had placed her gnarled hands over May's tiny ones and guided them across the keys, teaching her not just notes and scales but the language of emotion that transcended words. As the piece reached its crescendo, May was barely aware of her surroundings anymore. She didn't notice how the room had filled with more partygoers drawn by the unexpected music. She didn't see Mrs. Henderson standing in the doorway, mouth slightly open in surprise. She didn't register the phones now recording her performance, no longer poised to capture embarrassment but something altogether different. The final notes of Clair de Lune lingered in the air like a whispered secret. For a moment no one spoke. No one moved. Then as May opened her eyes, reality came rushing back. She blinked, disoriented by the sea of faces staring at her. What happened next caught her completely off guard. Someone started to clap. Then another person joined in, and another. Soon the room filled with applause, genuine and enthusiastic. "That was, wow," Liam said, looking at May as if seeing her for the first time. Zoe was beaming. "You never said you could play like that." Even Chad seemed impressed, though he tried to hide it. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her eyes bright with excitement. "My dear, that was absolutely beautiful. Where did you learn to play like that?" Before May could answer, a deep voice spoke from the back of the room. That wasn't just playing. That was performing. The crowd parted to reveal Mr. Henderson, who had apparently returned home and been drawn by the music. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the same blue eyes as Liam and Jin. "My grandmother taught me," May said quietly, still overwhelmed by the attention. "She was a piano teacher back in Shanghai before she moved here." "She taught you exceptionally well," Mr. Henderson said, approaching the piano. "I studied music at university, and I can tell you have a rare gift. The technical skill can be taught, but that feeling—" He shook his head, searching for words. "That comes from somewhere else." May felt a blush creeping up her neck. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from adults who seemed important and knowledgeable. "Could you play something else?" asked a girl May recognized from her math class. "Yes, please do," Mrs. Henderson encouraged. Suddenly everyone wanted to hear more. The same people who had been prepared to laugh at her moments ago now looked at her with newfound respect and curiosity. It was a strange feeling, this sudden shift from invisibility to the center of attention. I guess I could, May said hesitantly. She thought for a moment, then began to play again. This time, she chose something more lively, a piece by Chopin that Grandma Lee used to say had happy fingers. As she played, May noticed something changing within herself. The knot of anxiety that had been her constant companion since moving to this new town began to loosen. The music was bringing her back to herself, reminding her who she was beyond the new girl or the quiet one. When she finished the second piece, the applause was even more enthusiastic. People were smiling, talking excitedly among themselves. A few were asking her questions all at once. How long she'd been playing, if she performed anywhere, what other pieces she knew. Give her some space, Jin said, noticing May's slightly overwhelmed expression. He turned to her with a genuine smile. That was incredible. You should play here more often. Our piano hasn't sounded that good since, well, ever, Liam added, looking somewhat sheepish about his earlier indifference. May, would you consider playing at our community fundraiser next month? Mrs. Henderson asked suddenly. The musical act we booked had to cancel, and we've been scrambling to find a replacement. You would be perfect. A fundraiser? May repeated, startled by the suggestion. I don't know. I haven't performed in public before. Just for my family. Well, you could have fooled me, Mr. Henderson said. You have a natural stage presence. Please say yes, Mrs. Henderson pressed. It's for the new community center. We're trying to raise money for arts programs, including music lessons for kids who can't afford them. Something about that struck a chord with May. She thought of Grandma Lee, who had believed so strongly in the power of music to transform lives, who had sacrificed so much to give May the gift of music. I'll think about it, she promised, which seemed to satisfy Mrs. Henderson for the moment. As the party continued, everything had changed for May. People who had barely noticed her before now wanted to talk to her. Zoe stayed by her side, acting almost like a protective manager, helping to field questions and making sure May didn't feel too overwhelmed. You should have told me you were a piano prodigy, Zoe said as they grabbed snacks from the kitchen later. Here I was thinking I was doing you a favor by talking to the new girl, and you turn out to be the most interesting person at this whole party. May laughed, surprising herself. I'm not a prodigy. I just had a good teacher. Well, whatever you call it, you just went from invisible to legendary in about 5 minutes flat. Zoe grinned. And did you see Chad's face? Priceless. For the first time since moving to this town, May felt like perhaps she could belong here after all, not by trying to fit in or make herself smaller, but by finally letting herself be seen, by sharing the gift her grandmother had given her. As the evening wound down, Mrs. Henderson pulled her aside once more. I meant what I said about the fundraiser, May. Think about it. And regardless of your decision, you're welcome to come play our piano anytime. On the drive home, May's mother noticed the change immediately. You look different, she said, glancing over at her daughter. Did something good happen at the party? May looked out the window, watching the streetlights blur past. She thought of the piano, of the music that had been locked inside her for too long, of Grandma Lee, who had always told her that talents were meant to be shared. Yeah, she said softly, a small smile playing at her lips. Something good happened. What she didn't say, what she was only beginning to understand herself, was that maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The week following Liam's party passed in a blur for May. She walked the school hallways with a strange new awareness of being noticed. People who had never spoken to her before now smiled or waved. Some even stopped to chat, asking about her piano playing or wondering if she'd decided to perform at the community fundraiser. You're practically famous now, Zoe teased as they sat together at lunch on Friday. How does it feel? May poked at her cafeteria pasta, embarrassed by the attention. Weird, I'm still the same person I was before. Except now everyone knows you're secretly amazing, Zoe pointed out. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. So have you decided about the fundraiser? Mrs. Henderson called my mom yesterday to see if I could convince you to say yes. The fundraiser. May's stomach tightened at the thought. Playing at Liam's party had been one thing, an unexpected moment when emotion had overtaken her usual shyness. But performing on a stage in front of a crowd of strangers, the very idea made her palms sweat. I don't think I can, she admitted. What if I mess up? What if I freeze? What if... What if you're incredible and everyone loves it? Zoe interrupted. Like at the party? Before May could respond, a shadow fell across their table. They looked up to find Jin, Liam's college-age brother, standing there with a lunch tray. Mind if I join you? He asked. May blinked in surprise. Jin was home from college for some reason, and now he wanted to sit with them. Zoe seemed equally confused, but quickly made space. I stopped by your school to talk to my old music teacher, Jin explained, settling in. Thought I'd say hi while I'm here. Your music teacher? May asked. Mr. Okafor. I played violin for 7 years before switching to computer science in college. He shrugged. Not nearly as talented as you, though. May felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. Actually, Jin continued, that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you. My dad mentioned you hadn't decided about the fundraiser yet. Of course, that's what this was about. I'm not really a performer, May said quickly. What happened at the party was, I don't know. A fluke, maybe. Jin studied her for a moment. You know, I still remember my first recital. I was 8 and so terrified I nearly threw up backstage. That's not exactly encouraging, Zoe pointed out. Let me finish, Jin said with a laugh. My teacher told me something I never forgot. He said the fear doesn't go away. You just make room for it and play anyway. And he was right. I was still scared, but once I started playing, it didn't matter anymore. May poked at her food again. I promised my mom I'd think about it. That's all I can say right now. Jin nodded, respecting her hesitation. Fair enough. But if you decide to do it, I'd be happy to help you practice. We have that piano just sitting there collecting dust most of the time. The conversation shifted to other topics. Classes, college life, the upcoming basketball game. By the time lunch ended, May found herself warming to Jin's easy manner and genuine interest in her thoughts. Unlike some of her new admirers, he didn't treat her talent as a novelty or a party trick. He seemed to understand what music really meant. That evening, May sat at her desk trying to focus on homework, but her mind kept drifting. She opened her laptop and found herself typing Community Center Fundraiser into the search bar. The event page appeared, showing details about the planned arts programs, music lessons, painting classes, dance workshops, all designed to be accessible to kids regardless of family income. She thought of Grandma Lee, who had scraped together every spare dollar to buy that old upright piano, who had believed so strongly that music was not a luxury but a necessity for the soul. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Come in, she called. Her mother entered, carrying a small cardboard box. I was cleaning out the storage closet and found something you might want to see. May took the box, curious. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, slightly faded with age. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the top one, Grandma Lee seated at their old piano, her small hands positioned over the keys, her face alight with joy as 5-year-old May sat beside her. She was so proud of you, her mother said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Every time you learned a new piece, she would call all her friends to brag about her talented granddaughter. May carefully sorted through the photos, recitals in Grandma Lee's living room for neighbors, practice sessions captured when she wasn't looking, the two of them laughing together at the keys. Memories she had pushed away because they hurt too much. I miss her, May whispered, her vision blurring with tears. I know. Her mother reached over to squeeze her hand. But she's still with you every time you play. May looked up. How did you know I played at the party? Her mother smiled. Mrs. Henderson called me yesterday. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd heard in years. She wants me to play at this fundraiser, May admitted, for the community center arts programs. And what do you want? The question hung in the air. What did she want? To hide her talent away? To keep that part of herself locked up because sharing it meant remembering the pain of loss alongside the joy? Or to honor her grandmother by continuing what she had started? Me thought of Jin's words about making room for fear, of Zoe's unwavering support, of the way playing had made her feel, like she had found a piece of herself that had been missing. I think, she said slowly, I want to try. Her mother's face lit up with a smile that reminded May so much of Grandma Lee that her heart ached. Then that's what you should do. The next morning, May called Mrs. Henderson and said yes to the fundraiser. What followed was 3 weeks of intensity she hadn't experienced since Grandma Lee's most demanding lessons. She practiced daily after school on the Hendersons' piano, sometimes with Jin offering gentle suggestions when he was home for the weekend, sometimes with Mr. Henderson sharing insights from his music background. The pieces she chose reflected her journey, starting with Claire de Lune, the piece that had silenced the mockers at the party, then moving to Chopin's lively Waltz in a Minor to show her growing confidence, and ending with a piece Grandma Lee had composed herself, a melody that spoke of both sorrow and hope. As the day of the fundraiser approached, May's nerves intensified. She practiced until her fingers ached, determined not to let her grandmother down, not to let herself down. "You're going to be amazing," Zoe assured her after their final practice session, "just like at the party, but better because you've been working so hard." What if no one likes it? May couldn't help asking. The thought had been haunting her. "First of all, they will," Zoe said firmly. "And second, does it matter? You're not playing for them. You're playing for your grandmother and for yourself." The night of the fundraiser arrived cold and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. The community center was transformed with twinkling lights and flowers, tables arranged around a small stage where a piano waited. May peeked through the curtain at the gathering crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Quite a turnout," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Jin holding a small gift bag. "I brought you something," he said, handing it to her. "For good luck." Inside was a delicate bracelet with a single charm, a tiny piano. "Jin, it's beautiful, but I can't." "Sure you can," he interrupted with a smile. "Consider it payment for bringing our piano back to life. It had been silent for too long." As May fastened the bracelet around her wrist, Mrs. Henderson appeared to tell her they were ready to begin. The older woman squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Just remember, dear, the music is already inside you. The piano is just how you let it out." The words echoed what Grandma Lee had always said, and somehow that coincidence felt like a sign. May took a deep breath, thinking of the photographs in the box, of her grandmother's hands guiding hers, of the joy they had shared through music. As she walked onto the stage, the light seemed impossibly bright. The audience a sea of indistinct faces. Her legs felt weak, her mouth dry. For one terrible moment she feared she might turn and flee. Then she saw them. Her mother in the front row, smiling with tears in her eyes. Zoe giving an enthusiastic thumbs up. The Hendersons watching expectantly. Even Chad and some of her other classmates who had come to support her. May sat at the piano, adjusted her posture the way Grandma Lee had taught her, and placed her fingers on the keys. The familiar cool smoothness of the ivory grounded her. She closed her eyes for just a moment, imagining her grandmother beside her. "This is for you," she whispered, too softly for anyone to hear. And then she began to play, her fingers dancing across the keys. Her fear not gone, but transformed into something that gave her performance an edge of electricity, of raw emotion that reached out to touch everyone listening. May played not just with her hands, but with her heart, each note a testament to the power of finding your voice in a world determined to silence you, of reclaiming what was lost, of becoming, note by note, the person you were always meant to be. The moment May's fingers touched the piano keys, everything else faded away. The crowd, the lights, even her own anxiety seemed to dissolve into the background as the music took over. Claire de Lune flowed from her hands just as it had at the party, but this time with even more confidence, more emotion. She could feel the audience leaning in, their collective breath held as the delicate notes filled the room. When the final notes of the first piece drifted into silence, there was a beat of perfect stillness before the applause erupted. May barely had time to acknowledge it with a small nod before moving into Chopin's Waltz in a Minor, her fingers picking up speed, dancing across the keys with growing assurance. She caught glimpses of faces in the audience, her mother wiping away a tear, Zoe beaming with pride, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson watching with undisguised admiration. For the final piece, her grandmother's composition, May paused, gathering herself. She leaned toward the microphone that had been set up beside the piano. "This last piece was composed by my grandmother," she said softly, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "She called it Journey Home. It was her gift to me, and now I'd like to share it with all of you." She hadn't planned to speak, but somehow it felt important for people to know where this music came from, who had created it. As she began to play the familiar melody, she closed her eyes, letting the music carry her back to those afternoons in Grandma Lee's apartment. The smell of jasmine tea, the warm light filtering through the curtains, the gentle hands guiding hers. The piece started simply, almost like a lullaby before growing more complex, weaving in elements that hinted at traditional Chinese melodies alongside more contemporary influences. It told a story without words, of leaving home, of finding new paths, of carrying your roots with you wherever you go. It was Grandma Lee's story, and now it was May's too. As she played the final section, building to the emotional crescendo, May felt something unexpected, joy, pure and simple, flowing through her and into the music. Not just the memory of joy from the past, but new joy, present and alive in this moment. She wasn't just playing for her grandmother anymore. She was playing for herself, for everyone listening, for the pure love of bringing this music into the world. The final notes hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Then came the response, thunderous applause that startled May out of her musical trance. She opened her eyes to see the entire audience on their feet, their faces alight with emotion. Her mother was sobbing openly now, her hands pressed to her heart. Zoe was jumping up and down, whooping loudly enough to be heard over the applause. As May stood to take a bow, she caught sight of someone unexpected in the back of the room, her music teacher, Mrs. Chen, who had been trying unsuccessfully to get her to join the school band since she'd arrived. The older woman gave her a knowing smile and a small nod as if to say, "I knew you had it in you all along." The next few minutes passed in a blur as people surrounded her, offering congratulations, asking questions about her grandmother's composition, wanting to know if she gave lessons or performed regularly. Mr. Henderson was deep in conversation with a woman who turned out to be from the State University's music department. "That was unbelievable," Jin said when he finally managed to reach her. "You played even better than you did during practice. I've never heard that last piece before. It was beautiful." "Thanks," May said, fingering the piano charm on her bracelet. "I've never played it for anyone except my mom before tonight." "Well, I'm honored to have heard it." His smile was warm, genuine, and "I'm pretty sure you just raised more money for the arts program than anyone expected. People were literally lining up to donate after you finished." Before May could respond, Mrs. Henderson appeared at her side, practically glowing with excitement. "May, darling, you were magnificent." Professor Wilson from the university was absolutely blown away. "She'd like to speak with you about their Young Artists program." "Young Artists program?" May repeated, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. "It's a special mentorship opportunity," Mrs. Henderson explained. "Only a few students are selected each year. It would mean weekly sessions with university professors, master classes, maybe even some performance opportunities." May's mind reeled. Just weeks ago, she had been the invisible new girl, determined to keep her head down and her talent hidden. Now people were talking about programs and opportunities and performances, as if her entire future had suddenly taken a new direction. I need to talk to my mom," she managed to say. "Of course, dear, no rush. Professor Wilson said she'd be in touch next week." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her arm encouragingly before being pulled away by another guest. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, May found a moment to slip outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. She leaned against the building, letting the gentle breeze calm her racing thoughts. The door opened behind her and her mother stepped out. "There you are," she said. "I was starting to think you'd escaped through a window." May laughed. "I considered it." Her mother came to stand beside her, both of them looking up at the stars. "Your grandmother would have been so proud tonight," she said softly. "Not just of how beautifully you played, but of your courage in sharing her music." "I felt her with me," May admitted. "The whole time I was playing, especially her piece. It was like she was sitting right beside me on the bench." "She was?" Her mother's voice was thick with emotion. "She is always with you, May. In your music, in your heart." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before her mother spoke again. "Mrs. Henderson told me about the university program. It sounds like an amazing opportunity. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that," May said, voicing the doubt that had been swirling inside her since Mrs. Henderson's announcement. "What if they expect too much? What if I can't live up to it?" Her mother turned to face her, expression serious but kind. "May, do you remember what your grandmother used to say when you were afraid to try a new, more difficult piece?" May nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "The music is already there, waiting for you to find it." "Exactly. And she was right, wasn't she? Every time you were scared, every time you thought something was too hard, you tried anyway. And you found the music. Her mother took her hands. This program, these opportunities, they're just new pieces waiting for you to find the music in them. As they walked back inside, May was greeted by Zoe, who threw her arms around her in an enthusiastic hug. "You were amazing," Zoe practically shouted. "Everyone is talking about you. Did you see how many people were crying? Even Chad looked impressed, and you know how he tries to act cool about everything." May laughed, her friend's excitement contagious. "It felt good," she admitted. "Better than I expected." "So does this mean you'll join the school band now? Mrs. Chen was practically begging me to convince you after your performance." "Maybe," May said, surprising herself with the answer. "I think I might." As the evening wound down, Mr. Henderson approached her with a small envelope. "A little something from all of us who worked on the fundraiser," he explained. "Just a token of our appreciation." Inside was a gift card to a music store downtown along with a handwritten note. "For your next journey. Thank you for sharing your gift with us tonight." On the drive home, May sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. So much had changed in such a short time. From the moment she had reluctantly touched the keys at Liam's party to tonight's standing ovation, it felt like she had traveled a lifetime's worth of distance. "Penny, for your thoughts," her mother said, glancing over at her. "I was just thinking about how one moment can change everything," May replied. "If I hadn't gone to that party, if I hadn't played the piano that night." "But you did," her mother pointed out. "That's the thing about life, May. We never know which choices will be the ones that open new doors." When they arrived home, exhausted but happy, May found a text message waiting on her phone. It was from Jin. "My dad said Professor Wilson is already pulling strings to get you into the Young Artists program. Just so you know, you deserve every opportunity coming your way. What you shared tonight wasn't just talent, it was a gift to everyone who heard it." May read the message twice, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. For so long after Grandma Lee died, she had kept her music locked away, thinking that playing would only bring pain, only remind her of what she'd lost. But tonight had shown her something different, that sharing her grandmother's gift wasn't betraying her memory but honoring it. That the music they had created together could live on, could touch others, could open doors she never imagined walking through. As she got ready for bed, May caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked different somehow, more confident, more present in her own skin. The quiet, invisible new girl was still there, but now there was something else too, someone who wasn't afraid to be seen, someone who had found her voice not in words but in music. She touched the piano charm on her bracelet, a small smile playing at her lips. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered to the empty room, "for everything." And somewhere, somehow, she felt certain her grandmother heard. 6 months had passed since the community center fundraiser, and May's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Spring had given way to summer and summer to fall, bringing with it a new school year and new rhythms to her days. The Young Artists program at the university had become the highlight of her week. Every Saturday morning, May would take the bus downtown to the impressive brick buildings of the music department, where she would spend 3 hours under the guidance of Professor Wilson and other instructors. The program was more challenging than anything she had experienced before, pushing her beyond what she thought she could accomplish, but she thrived under the structured guidance that reminded her so much of Grandma Lee's teaching. "Your technique is impressive," Professor Wilson had told her during their first session. "But what sets you apart is how you communicate emotion. That can't be taught. It comes from somewhere deeper." Today was special, though. Today wasn't just another Saturday practice session. It was the Young Artist Showcase, where all 12 students in the program would perform for an audience of family, friends, university faculty, and even some local media. May had been preparing for weeks, polishing her performance piece, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, until every note felt like a natural extension of herself. "Nervous?" her mother asked as they walked through the university's tree-lined pathway toward the recital hall. The leaves were turning golden and red, floating down around them like colorful rain. "A little," May admitted, but not like before. It was true. The paralyzing stage fright that had nearly prevented her from performing at the fundraiser had gradually mellowed into something more manageable, a flutter of excitement rather than a storm of anxiety. "Oh, there's Zoe," her mother said, pointing ahead. Zoe was waiting at the entrance to the hall, bouncing on her toes with characteristic enthusiasm. She had attended every one of May's performances over the past months, appointing herself as unofficial photographer and biggest fan. "Ready to blow everyone's minds?" Zoe asked, giving May a quick hug. "As ready as I'll ever be," May replied with a smile. Inside, the hall was already filling with people. May spotted several familiar faces, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, who had continued to support her musical journey, Mrs. Chen, her school music teacher, who had finally convinced May to join the school band, and even Liam and some of their classmates who had come to show their support. "Look who else is here," Zoe whispered, nudging May and nodding toward the back of the hall. Jin stood near the door chatting with a friend. He caught May's eye and waved, mouthing "good luck" across the room. Though he was busy with his studies at the university, he had become a steady presence in May's life. Part mentor, part friend, and lately, maybe something more. They had spent hours together on weekends when he was home, sometimes practicing music, sometimes just talking about books or films or their dreams for the future. Backstage, May joined the other young musicians, all adjusting their clothing, warming up their fingers, or going through last-minute mental preparations. As one of the newest additions to the program, May had been placed in the middle of the lineup, not opening the show, but not closing it either. 2-minute warning, the stage manager announced. May took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She touched the piano charm bracelet that had become her good luck talisman, thinking of how far she had come since that first reluctant touch of the Hendersons' piano keys. The showcase began with a violinist, followed by a cellist. May watched from the wings, admiring their skill, their confidence. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with measured steps, the way Professor Wilson had taught them. The lights were bright but no longer blinding. The audience was a sea of faces but no longer intimidating. She sat at the piano, adjusted her posture, and placed her hands on the keys. For just a moment, she allowed herself to think of Grandma Lee, imagining her sitting in the front row, eyes bright with pride. Then she began to play. The ballade was a challenging piece, full of emotional contrasts and technical demands. It told a story through music, beginning gently, almost questioning, before building to passionate intensity, then returning to reflection before its powerful conclusion. As May played, she felt herself becoming part of that story, her fingers drawing out each note with precision and heart. Time seemed to both stretch and compress. What felt like moments and forever simultaneously, the final chords resonated through the hall. There was a breath of silence, that perfect moment of connection between performer and audience. Before the applause began, building to enthusiastic approval, May stood and bowed, her eyes finding her mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Next to her, Zoe was on her feet, clapping wildly. The Hendersons, Jin, her classmates, all applauding with genuine appreciation. This wasn't polite recognition. It was real connection, real impact. After the performance, the reception area buzzed with conversation and congratulations. May found herself surrounded by well-wishers, including several people she didn't recognize. "That was quite impressive," said a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, introducing herself as the dean of the music department. "Professor Wilson has spoken highly of your progress in the program." "Thank you," May said, still buzzing with adrenaline from her performance. "It's been an amazing opportunity." "We think you might be ready for the next step," the dean continued. "There's a summer intensive program in New York that accepts a handful of promising young pianists each year. Professor Wilson and I would like to recommend you for it." May blinked in surprise. "New York. That's incredible, but it's a full scholarship program," the dean added, seeming to understand May's hesitation, "including housing and transportation. Think about it. Professor Wilson has all the details when you're ready to discuss it." As the dean moved on to speak with other students, May felt a light touch on her arm. It was Jin holding a small bouquet of flowers. "These are for you," he said, handing them to her. "You were amazing up there." "Thanks," she replied, her cheeks warming. "I didn't expect to see you today. Don't you have midterms to study for?" He shrugged. "Some things are more important than studying. Like watching my favorite pianist bring an entire audience to tears." "I did not make people cry," May protested, laughing. "Check your mom's face," Jin said with a grin. "Waterworks." As if on cue, her mother appeared at her side. eyes still red-rimmed but shining with pride. "My brilliant, brave girl," she said, pulling May into a tight hug. "Your grandmother would have been so proud today." "I felt her with me," May admitted softly. "When I was playing, like she was guiding my hands." Her mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. "She is always with you in your music. That will never change no matter where it takes you." "Speaking of which," May began, "the dean just told me about a summer program in New York. Later that evening, after celebratory dinner at their favorite restaurant, me sat at the small digital piano they had purchased for their apartment a few months ago. It wasn't a grand piano like the Hendersons, but it was hers, and it had been worth every extra shift her mother had taken at work to afford it. She played softly, not practicing any particular piece, just letting her fingers wander over the keys. So much had changed since that party, when she had been laughed at for approaching the piano. The memory no longer stung. Instead, it felt like the opening notes of a piece that was still being composed measure by measure, day by day. Her phone lit up with a text message. It was from Zoe. "Still can't believe how amazing you were today. BTW, did you hear about the dean's offer?" Jin told me. "New York? We have to talk tomorrow." May smiled, typing back a quick reply. Then another message came through, this one from Jin. "Just wanted to say again how incredible you were today. Whatever you decide about the summer program, I know you're going to keep sharing your gift with the world. That's who you are now, who she was now." The phrase lingered in her mind as she returned to the piano, playing a few notes of Grandma Lee's composition, "Journey Home." She was no longer just the quiet new girl, the invisible student, the one who hid her talents. She was a pianist, a musician, a performer. She was her grandmother's legacy and her own future all at once. Outside her window, the autumn leaves continued to fall, gold and red against the darkening sky. One season flowing into another, change happening so gradually you barely noticed until suddenly everything was different. That's how it had been with her life. One moment at Liam's party leading to another at the fundraiser, leading to the program, leading to today's performance and the possibility of New York. She thought of what her mother had said the night of the fundraiser, about never knowing which choices would open new doors. The girl who had been laughed at for touching the piano could never have imagined where that moment would lead. But here she was, transformed not just by talent but by the courage to share it. May played the final notes of her grandmother's composition, letting them hang in the air like a promise. Whatever came next, whether New York or somewhere else entirely, she would carry this music with her, this gift that had once been hidden and was now her brightest light. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning, but now she was ready to play every note.